Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, January 12th, 2026. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Sarah Goodyear, Doug Gordon, authors of Life After Cars. Also on the program today, Trump's DOJ opens criminal investigation against the Federal Reserve Chair. Death toll from protests in Iran, over 500 killed, 10,000 detained, reportedly. Kristi Noem continues to lie about the Minnesota killings, says more Trump troops are preparing to invade the state. Meanwhile, ICE denies entry to 3 Minnesota congresswomen at a facility that looks like just some type of paramilitary camp setup. Largest nursing strike in New York City history begins. House Republicans pulled DHS funding from this week's planned vote on a partial spending package. That's important. Exxon says thanks, but no thanks to Trump's offer of Venezuelan oil. Trump then whines and says he's running the country. Venezuela, in addition to America. Record number of adults ID now as independents. Democrat numbers pop up just a little bit. Ohio Republican Senator Bernie Moreno, you remember him from that prank that his intern played on him.
Hilarious.
The classic grinder in Florida prank. Comes out in favor of extending the Obamacare subsidies. He's got a race this year.
Oh, yeah. Sherrod Brown, 2026.
Trump says civil rights led to white people being badly treated. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is
Fun Day Monday.
You know, the that stuff gets more ironic the deeper we go.
Fun Day Monday.
It's Fun Day.
Yeah.
As the fun half is also now like sort of turned a little bit more ironic of a slogan. Lot to get to in the news today. You know, we this is a book that we have on to the program today that I've wanted to interview these folks for a while. And this was an issue that was more heated, it felt like, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, in terms of like bikes and cars and whatnot. It is really important in an era where the country has moved to authoritarianism, like full on, like, I think, and part of the reason why we're going to start the show with this clip about Jerome Powell is the Federal Reserve is the only institution that the Supreme Court has decided is not subject to complete whim by the president, which of course is also in my estimation, an incorrect assessment of other independent agencies that Congress has set up as being independent. But they're really concerned because for rich people, the Fed and the Fed's actions and the Fed's supposed independence is paramount in terms of their ability to make money. And at least in the sort of like in whatever stage of capitalism we were in before it all just became, let's just go to the casino every day at the highest stakes possible. We're watching the fascism on the streets of Minneapolis, throughout Minnesota. We're watching their response to having killed, and I would argue probably second-degree murder of a woman on the streets of Minneapolis. And the response is by these jackbooted thugs, depending on what they could get at the Army-Navy shop that they shop at, is to ramp up their violence, to become more violent. And the other part of that fascism we're seeing now where Trump is using the government. He's tried to prosecute Tish James. He tried to prosecute Comey. He is pardoning all his friends for a certain amount of money. I mean, let's not say friends, friends in the same way that you go to like an open air market and they go, well, I'll give you a break, my friends. Yeah. So this is all part and part of the authoritarianism, the fascism that's happening in this country. And everything that I have read about how to fight this stuff, particularly as it's being rolled out, is for people to maintain a vision of what life can be without this. That this is not a foregone conclusion, that this is not the normal state of being, that you can, it's important to have aspirations and a vision for the future as you fight this stuff. And it can be as banal as like more walkable, more, cities, more public transportation, less detriment to the environment, less social isolation that, a life without cars would bring. And so, we're going to try and sort of like maintain this balance of talking about a vision for the future. And, what Zohran Mamdani, like just even frankly, over the weekend, or was it last week, he proposed 9,000 new public toilets in the city.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not the sexiest thing. I mean, maybe it's very not sexy, but in the strict sense of the word. But in terms of just like a quality of life,
huge.
Huge.
I've been saying
it is 1,000, but it's huge still.
It's 1,000. It feels like 10 feels
Four
like
in there,
9,000.
yeah, just anywhere.
But the idea of the child care stuff, I mean, it is very important to hold on an aspirational vision and a belief that there can be something different. Like there can be a world where we don't have buffed up paramilitary roaming the streets when they decide to invade a city and attack black and brown people. And then the white people that would dare to even speak up about it. And so this is very important stuff in that regard. Here is the latest assault. Fascistic, authoritarian, whatever of those two words you want to use, I think you can go back and forth. But again, we've seen a rollout, an invasion, over 2,000 paramilitary brown shirts, maybe not technically because they've been so professionalized.
Too formal.
Too formal. Rolled out in Minneapolis, Minnesota in general. And now back in Washington, we're watching Donald Trump use the DOJ as a weapon. Again, they tried it with James. They tried it with Comey. It didn't work. Now they're going after, and let's be clear. They're going after Jerome Powell. And listen, I have issues with the Federal Reserve. I think they should be more transparent. I think they should be perhaps less independent, structurally speaking. There should be more oversight. But this is not the way to do it, because this is just intimidation tactics. Trump is trying to make Jerome Powell, not only whose term is up in May anyways, but he wants to make sure that he doesn't stick around on the Board of Governors. He wants to make sure that the next chair of the Fed understands that Donald Trump will make your life a miserable hell, if not send you to jail, if you don't do what he says. And what he wants is low interest rates so that he can prime this disastrous economy he has created with the hopes that it will just pop up a little bit before the midterm elections. Here's Jerome Powell after finding out that the DOJ is criminally investigating him because of cost overruns that have taken place at the building of the Federal Reserve construction over the past several years.
Good evening. On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned in part a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people. Thank you.
So now, again, this is not about Jerome Powell as much as it is about Donald Trump, using the Department of Justice as his personal sort of like vengeance tour. Apparently, this is according to Bloomberg, Bill Pulte, that's the guy from the Federal Housing Finance Agency, the director, Bill Pulte. He is the same one who rooted around in mortgage applications to try and get Lisa Cook and also Tish James. But Lisa Cook, who is a sitting governor on the Fed, try and get her fired for cause because of some discrepancy on her mortgage application.
We hate those.
And Tish James, same thing.
Yep. Tish James and the Comey ones, those were thrown out.
And the Cook one was also thrown out.
This is lawfare that Trump ironically ran against. Apparently, that was lawfare to hold him accountable for, like, say, the coup attempt he did in 2020.
So according to Bloomberg, it's Pulte who essentially convinced Trump to
another real estate centered attack on his critics. I wonder if this could be coming from the mind of Donald Trump.
I wonder where in Trump's imagination he thinks all of this like fraud about real estate.
I get the sense that people lie a lot when they're looking for a mortgage. That's just my sense. So why don't you root around that? My guess is nobody ever takes those things seriously, and they'll write anything.
Yeah.
That's just my guess. My spidey sense is tingling.
The other
Now,
character
here's
that's in
the
this
thing.
is Janine Pirro, by the way. That's her office. That's the one that's rooting around
Pulte
in
goes
this.
to DOJ, goes to Janine Pirro, who is like, probably sitting there going, sounds good to her. And, but here's the thing. Powell now, particularly after this, sending out this, it looks to me like Powell has made a decision about whether he's going to stick around on the Board of Governors after being chair. He could have left. I get the sense he may stick around a little bit, but we shall see. In the meantime, we've got a lot to talk about what's going on to the extent that we know in Iran. And the rumors that the Trump administration is ready to bomb Iran again. Also, we've got a lot of footage from Minneapolis over the weekend, including the attempt by Congress people to do some oversight of this ICE facility. We will get to that and more. But in a moment, we're going to be talking to Doug Gordon and Sarah Goodyear, host of the War on Cars podcast, about their book written with Aaron Naparstek, Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile. We'll read that. We'll be talking to them in just a second. First, a word from our sponsor. How are you resetting your home for the new year to give yourself a fresh start? I'll tell you what I'm doing. I am basically like putting cardboard on the windows and
locking yourself inside
and reading up about Meshtastic. But there's another thing. Once you're locked in there, the other thing you might want to do is maybe upgrade your towels and your sheets. I got to say, honestly, I have so much of now, like all of my houseware, particularly after the holidays, because I got I bought PJs as gifts from Cozy Earth. I bought myself some new socks from Cozy Earth. They have great socks. I got new sheets from Cozy Earth. Like all in the past month. It's sort of nuts. I think I may be dealing with my stress that way, but it's great stuff. How does starting fresh in the home affect you out of the home? Well, I'm much more rested. And I'm basically psyched to get back home. Cozy Earth has got quality. It's comfortable. It has, and it's something that, as a gift anyways, people use over and over again. Cozy Earth's Baja bedding set. This is Cozy Earth's first collection to have a complete matching set. Matching sheets, matching duvet cover, to the matching quilt and coverlet. I have not seen the quilt or coverlet. I've gotten the duvet cover.
Same here. Big
Mila was so excited because she was coming home, and her bedroom is not exactly like it's a shared it's New York City apartment living, and she's like, Dad, will you let me get some new bedding, because the stuff that she had was really old. It was sort of makeshift. She hasn't been home in a full-time way for years, obviously. And I had already bought her like a Cozy Earth sheets, duvet, and duvet cover. And she was like, damn, girl. That's the way she talks now. She was very happy. It's beautiful. She was psyched. And it just makes her feel like,
yeah,
I'm happy to have you
in
home.
Luxury.
Honestly. Great stuff. Plus, luxury bath towels. Indulge in everyday luxury with our Luxe bath towel set. So soft and plush. These towels are crafted with a unique blend of cotton and viscose from bamboo, using innovative zero-twist technology. The result, towels feel like a gentle hug, drying you off quickly and efficiently with an elevated design that ensures they look as good as they feel, offering exceptional softness and absorbency, making them a must-have for your post-shower routine. Cozy Earth purchases are risk-free. They got a 100-night sleep trial. Try them out. If you don't love them, return them hassle-free. They also have a 10-year warranty. Because once you feel this level of comfort, you want it to last a decade. Thanks to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode. Start the new year off right. Give your home the luxury it deserves. Make home the best part of life. Head to CozyEarth.com. Use our code Majority Report for up to 20% off. That's CozyEarth.com. Code Majority Report, all one word. And if you get a post-purchase survey, be sure to mention you heard about Cozy Earth from this program. Refresh your routines and comfort. It makes every day feel like a new year. We'll put that link in the podcast and YouTube description. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. If you want the free show free of commercials, become a member. Join themajorityreport.com. Join themajorityreport.com. Okay, quick break. Doug Gordon, Sarah Goodyear, host of the Wars on Cars podcast, authors of Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile. Be right back. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Doug Gordon, Sarah Goodyear. They're hosts of the War on Cars podcast, and they are co-authors with Aaron Naparstek of Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile. Welcome to the program, both of you. Sarah, let's just start with you with the... just give us the broad strokes on the overall argument that you guys are making about cars, because it's not that no one should have cars anymore. Is it?
No, it's not that. It is that we have built a society in which owning and operating a car is a requirement for full enfranchisement in the society, and that is fundamentally inegalitarian and dangerous to our society and our planet in a number of different ways. And what we need to do is we need to minimize car use wherever possible, and especially in cities. We really need to build cities that put people before cars. And if we did that, because cars are at the bottom of a lot of our problems, we would actually be able to make a lot of positive change through those types of actions.
Let's and Doug, I want you to take us through some of the damage or the tyranny, I guess, of the car culture. And you grew up in Massachusetts, as I did. Worcester's a little bit bigger of a city than Andover, but it's still very much. There was not like there were buses, but there was not that much public transport. I did a lot of bike riding as a kid, but it's very much a car culture.
Yeah, I grew up on a cul-de-sac off of a pretty main arterial road, Route 28, and there were no sidewalks. And like you said, very little in the way of a bus. I did bike every now and then to school, but you're sort of taking your life into your hands. Maybe my parents did make the wisest choice in letting me do that at the time. And that tyranny we chose that word in the subtitle very purposely, because what it means for something to be tyrannical is like you're always dependent on it, or you're always thinking about it. It's never not a factor in your life. We're experiencing that right now in our culture. And, when I was a kid, I was trapped at home until, unless my parents could drive me somewhere, until I got my license, when the car was available, when I had my license, as opposed to now where I live in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and not every place is like Park Slope, Brooklyn, but my kids have tremendous independence to go by themselves, to take the subway by themselves, to walk to school alone, to meet up with friends. So that's the sort of tyranny that we're trying to unleash ourselves from.
I want to get into the more the sort of the damage, but before we do, Sarah, walk us through the rise of cars and how we have sort of like become so dependent on it. I had to at first I thought like, oh, this is sort of ironic. Our last name's Goodyear. And then, from, I guess maybe it was from the death of the electric vehicle or something, like the sort of the supposed conspiracy theory about Detroit and how all the light rail got ripped up essentially from Detroit. I mean, frankly, from just about everywhere at one point or another. And it was Firestone that was in that. But nevertheless, there's a certain amount of irony that your last name has to do with Goodyear. I assume it's ironic, but walk us through sort of like the how we have become so car dependent, because particularly in the cities, but we had much more of a robust train system, trolley system in this country. I guess now 75 years ago or so.
Yeah, I mean, you probably won't be surprised to find out that there were major corporate interests that were invested in creating a world in which they could profit from the proliferation of automobile dominance and, of course, the use of fossil fuels. And one of the examples we cite in the book is a show that Groucho Marx, the comedian, did called America's Love Affair with the Automobile. That was sponsored by DuPont, which at the time had a 23% interest in General Motors. And that whole idea of the American love affair with the automobile, much like the phrase cooking with gas, is not some organic phrase that sprung up from the American people. That was a corporate slogan that was promoted in a television show that was very explicitly designed to tell people, if you have problems with this, you shouldn't, because it's great and we have a love affair with it. And that came after decades of people pushing back against automobiles often owned by rich people, ripping through their cities, killing children. There was a time in the 20s and 30s when we put up memorials for traffic violence victims that looked a lot like war memorials, because that's how sustained the attack on citizens in the cities was. And it was definitely perceived as elites coming through and just using our neighborhoods as highways. And of course, that still exists today, but after 100 years of being told that this is completely normal and there's nothing to see here, we've kind of lost the narrative. There's nobody alive now who remembers a life before cars. So what we're trying to do with the book is to let people know it wasn't always like this. It doesn't have to be like this. There are lots of places that are changing it, and we could be part of that, but there are corporate interests that are continuing to make that seem like an impossibility.
Well, can you talk a little bit about that time period then? I mean, maybe Doug, if you want to expand on it, just because you look at like what you had existing cities that changed the way that the city was structured or the infrastructure to accommodate the car. But when you go out west and you see, of course, cities with like more sprawl, Los Angeles, or even I think of like Houston or something like that, you see how it's very much constructed around the car. So it's so embedded into our infrastructure and into our communities across the country. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you mentioned Los Angeles. There's a great line in Who Framed Roger Rabbit when Eddie Valiant, the detective, hops on a streetcar and these little kids ask him, "Hey buddy, don't you have a car?" And he says, "Who needs a car in LA? We have the greatest public transit system in the world." But we cite an example in the book. There's a really excellent book that we drew from. It's called Fighting Traffic by the historian Peter Norton, who's at University of Virginia. And he tells the story of 1923 in Cincinnati, where the city had actually gained enough public support, 46,000 signatures in favor of an ordinance to limit the speed of automobiles to 25 miles an hour by a mechanical governor. So your car would not be capable of going faster than 25. And the interests of motordom that Peter Norton calls sort of the road builders, the car clubs, and all the rest really fought back against this. And they sent letters to every registered car owner in the city. They took out ads in the local papers saying that if this went through, it would be equivalent to erecting what they called a Great Wall of China around Cincinnati that would send drivers and their money and business to Indianapolis and Louisville and other nearby cities. And they fought back. And eventually the ordinance went down overwhelmingly just because of this sort of corporate propaganda lobbying effort that defeated it. And, you know, we talk in the book a little bit about, had it succeeded, maybe we'd be living in a world today where speeds were controlled by GPS or other things, you know, smart technology in your car. So that's just one example. I mean, you know, Sarah said there are all of these memorials, thousands of people marching in the streets, many of them children. They were called, the parents at the time were called White Star mothers, much like Gold Star families in the military who have lost loved ones in service to the country. There were memorials with the mangled bodies of children. This is in like places like Baltimore, Pittsburgh, all over the nation, because it was seen as this urban assault, this monster that was attacking the innocent people of various cities. The New York Times ran a headline, "Nation Roused Against Motor Killings," with the picture of Death, the Grim Reaper, driving a car over the bodies of women and children. So there was just national outrage at, you know, cars weren't necessary back then. So it was seen as an intruder on our cities.
Has there been like have we sort of come back around to that in terms? I mean, because there was an era where, I mean, obviously what happens is there's this huge push, both from like both a cultural level. I mean, Groucho Marx, you know, when we say a guy promulgated something on a TV show today, it's like, okay, so 50 people saw it. You know, but back then you're talking like a third of the country is literally tuning into this show in the 1950s. There's only two or three TV shows on at a time, and a third of the country is tuning into this. And so you can really actually like impact the culture with a couple of key spokespeople, essentially. And then you have this simultaneous, like sort of a lobbying campaign on the local levels to start pulling back on streetcars, on planned trains, et cetera, build more roads. And then we get into sort of almost like a purposeful dependency on the car, like even like the way that they built the roads in the 50s and 60s and 70s out west, they're so huge. It's like the idea of crossing the street is like, I would never do that. Like, you know, like it's really that big. Do you feel like it's come back around on some level? Like the way that people have organized themselves in some areas has made the car less important. Never mind as a by design, but like just simply less needed.
I think that there are cities, and New York, where we live, is among them, that have really worked hard to improve transit and to improve public space. But unfortunately, I think what we're seeing is instead, in a lot of places, public transit systems are being actively defunded. And we're being told that we don't have money for public transit, just kind of like we don't have money for education or healthcare. And, you know, I think unfortunately, we're seeing a situation in which precisely because people are more organized and more aware than ever before of the negative effects that cars have on our communities and especially on the environment, the climate movement has been a huge part of this, that the forces that are in power are certainly kind of running scared at this point. So they're doubling down and you're seeing a lot of backlash. But I think that's part of an evolution that's happening because the awareness, I've been covering this as a reporter for 20 years. And let me tell you, it used to be so niche and so I would kind of tell people that I met, you know, in other parts of my life, oh yeah, I report on transportation policy. I wouldn't come out and say I report on the effort to get cars out of our cities because people just weren't open to it. The change has been enormous. And I think a lot of that has to do with the enormous financial burden that car ownership imposes on the people of the United States of America in particular. You know, cars have gotten more and more and more expensive. Insurance has gotten more and more and more expensive. You have to buy houses that are farther and farther away from where you work. And I think it's all part of, I think right now what we're seeing is a movement that is bringing together people from the climate movement, from the active transportation movement, and from the affordable housing movement, who are really starting to put it together in a systemic way that these issues are all closely related. And, I always say that a walkable neighborhood in the United States of America has become a luxury good. How can we accept this? The idea that you have to be rich in order to live somewhere where you can walk to the store. How is that about freedom, which allegedly we're so in favor of in this country?
Let's talk about what has, where there have been successes. And before we get there, I'm also curious, it looks like we're not headed towards an electric vehicle future, at least at the rate that we were maybe a year ago, which frankly, even then was not as quick as it would be if, we just got over the fact that the Chinese seem to have figured it out much better than we have. And we should say, what's fascinating to me is the relationship between what light rail could do, let's say, in the sort of exurbs and the suburbs, and the value of an electric vehicle that, let's say, only had 150 miles on a charge. If you could get, there's a world where we had light rail going around and, parking lots where these electric vehicles are charging is 150 miles, round trip, whatever it is. All of a sudden, that's a lot of mileage for what you need if you can go the bulk of the distance on light rail. But talk about where we're seeing or around the world. I mean, you mentioned 3 different cities. I think it is Ghent in Belgium, Paris, and then Emeryville in California. Tell us about I don't know. Pick one of those, Doug, and let us know and tell us sort of the someone's vision and how it's come through.
Yeah, I traveled to Ghent in reporting on the book, and Ghent is a really interesting city because it was as car clogged as any other. They experimented with cars in the post-war period and parked cars in their historic plazas, and the city was just choked with cars. And starting in the 90s, they started to claw back some space in the historic center. But as time went on into the 2010s, through the economic prosperity of that time, the city was getting more crowded and once again was filling up with cars. And the mobility minister there, sort of the transportation director, a man named Philippe Watteau, basically said, we got to do something about this. But we don't have a lot of money. It's a small city of about 260,000 people. And we know we don't have a lot of time because the politics of this can change so rapidly. So what can we get done in a short amount of time? Looked at a few European examples, including Groningen in the Netherlands and Copenhagen in Denmark, and said, we're going to try to do a little bit of what they've done everywhere. And so what they did was they divided the city into 6 sort of sections. And there's a big ring road that goes around the city. And they basically said, if you want to drive from section 1 to section 4, you can't cut through the middle of the city. Or if you're just not even doing business in the city, you can't drive through the middle. So what you have to do instead is drive out, around, and back in. And they did that by reversing some of the directions of some of the streets, closing off other streets and making them bus only, pedestrian only, cyclist only, putting up new signs and cameras and things like that. And when they flipped the switch on this plan in 2017, it dramatically increased the amount of people cycling and walking, because suddenly if you have to drive out, around, and back in, and it takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes to do that, you might say, walking or taking the bus or cycling, it's going to be 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. And cycling went way up. Pollution went way down. My favorite experience of that city was it was very quiet, even though there were tons of people wandering about and tons of cyclists going about, because all the cars were creating all the noise. And they had a very ambitious goal of hitting, I forget what the exact mode share was for cyclists by 2030. They hit it within 2 years, because as soon as you just got rid of the cars, everyone felt much safer. And it cost them less than 10 million euros to do it, which, you know, you couldn't repair a highway interchange for less than $10 million. So Ghent is a really good example of how a small city that is not, you know, Paris, it's not New York, it's not London, can do a lot in a short amount of time with a little bit of money.
What are the other implications, like economic activity downtown? I guess rents. I mean, I would imagine it starts becoming a more desirable place to live, and maybe it impacts rents. I don't know what Belgium does in terms of
I don't
housing.
know in the case of Ghent how it impacted rents. I do know there's more economic activity downtown. And interestingly, one of the biggest beneficiaries of this program has been drivers, because if you live in the center of the city and you need to drive to your home, if you're an older person who has no other means of getting around, now you don't have all of these people driving through the city, just cutting through on their way from home to work in totally different spaces. And so they have seen travel times from the outer edge of the city to the center of the city go down. It's better for emergency response. Plumbers and other service technicians have found it's easier to make appointments. Very similar to how we're seeing in New York with congestion pricing, where a lot of the early polling is showing that drivers are actually the ones who like it the most.
Yeah, and I believe that the Netherlands, famous for its bicycling infrastructure, is the home to the most satisfied drivers in the world.
Well, you mentioned New York City, right? And New York copied, I believe, some of the congestion pricing plans in London. And was Tokyo another example?
Stockholm, Milan.
Sorry?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, but when I think about those places, it's just, you know, New York is also unique in having a very robust public transportation system. Yeah. So part of the problem, I mean, a huge part of the problem, obviously, is that so many of these cities are isolated and not connected to a broader network of transportation, which would require a ton of state and federal investment. Like, how do you take this fight from the municipal level to the federal level?
I think there are some cities that it really would work for right now. I mean, of course, with the federal government being what it is and would never approve another congestion pricing program. But, you know, Chicago, San Francisco, Boston, you could easily start there. But yes, you're right. You'd have to really invest in, it's sort of a chicken and egg problem. You'd have to invest in a little bit of transit before you could convince people to get out of their cars. But you need the ridership to justify the transit investments. You know, but there's a lot people could do. You know, I think the Ghent example is a good one. Despite the fact that they have excellent public transportation, like a lot of the benefits we're talking about. I mean, Sam, you were talking about electric vehicle range, you know, of 150 miles or 300 miles. Most people in this country are traveling less than 3 miles. The average trip in this country is less than 3 miles. That's a distance that could be easily covered on an electric bicycle or a standard bicycle if the infrastructure was there and it was a bit safer to do so. So we're not talking about huge, expensive investments that could get the ball rolling just a little bit.
Sarah, talk about like how we have gotten to where we are in New York today, because I was an early Streets blog reader. I read quite a bit by Aaron Naparstek, who helped you with this book. Literally when 20 years ago, I remember, what was it, Critical Mass, taking over the streets with bikes on Tuesday nights, and occasionally would join in on that. And it seems like there's been actually some real progress, but it was, you know, I mean, I remember like Anthony Weiner, supposedly when he was running for mayor before his problem he had with texting came out, I supposedly said to, I think it was the city head of transport, like, I'm going to rip those bike lanes out of everywhere. That was his, I don't think that was apocryphal. I think that was actually a true story.
That's true.
That's a true story.
But yet, like, now we have congestion pricing, and there's this sort of sense of like, within months, it was clear that like it completely addressed all of the those people who are against it. It seems to have been a like raging success, and it feels like we're on the brink of like, it feels like these decisions are more sort of like going downhill in terms of like the wind is at the back of these decisions. How did we get there over the course of the past 20 years, particularly like going through COVID, where it seems like you would imagine there's less of an interest of like being around people when you're sick?
Well, we'll get back to COVID in a second, but yeah, I grew up in New York using a bicycle for transportation when that was absolutely a foolhardy thing to do, considering what the lack of infrastructure was at that time. So I was always skeptical that New York could make these changes. And then during the Bloomberg administration, which I have a lot of issues with the Bloomberg administration, don't get me wrong, but one of the great things that he did was he appointed Jeanette Sadik-Khan as his commissioner of Department of Transportation. And then he allowed her to do what she knew was the right thing to do, which was to start to take public space back for New Yorkers from automobiles, most visibly in Times Square, in a pilot program that later became permanent, and in the bike lane network and the planning for a rollout of these things that was going to take years. There was a lot of positive action that happened under Bloomberg. We got City Bike, all sorts of great things happen. And I saw my city that I never thought would have these amenities and these safety measures for cyclists in place suddenly became a national and even an international model for that. But then under the de Blasio administration, things slowed down a little bit. And then under the Adams administration, things came to a crushing halt. And indeed, we were backsliding. And one of the main scandals that the Adams administration was involved in was over the McGinnis bike lane and the McGinnis Boulevard redesign, which was in response to fatalities in the region. And there was, it seems to be, corruption involved in rolling
with
those
Eric
things
Adams?
back.
Oh, yeah.
Shocking,
Surprise,
right?
Shocker, I know.
So, but what we've seen, what was so inspiring about Mayor Mamdani's campaign was that he made public transportation, buses in particular, the most maligned, most stigmatized form of transportation in this country. He made that one of his 3 central platforms. And by doing so, he said, I believe that bus riders and all transit riders and all people who don't use cars in this city are worthy of the same dignity and respect and accommodation that people who drive cars are. People who drive cars are not worth more than people who take the bus. And that was the message of Fast and Free buses for me. And it is resonating around the country, I'm going to say. As we go around the country touring this book, what we hear from people is just a real excitement about the idea that human beings are going to be put at the center of city planning. And so we saw the mayor in the first week of his administration go and address a piece of infrastructure that was notorious here in New York, the Williamsburg bike bump, the bike lane coming off the Williamsburg Bridge, which it does into a very dangerous area. And it had this crazy bump that you had to fly over to get off the bike lane. Well, the mayor was there with a shovel and he did something about that. He needs to still work on the NYPD and their ticketing in that area, but there's going to be a comprehensive redesign of that, of Delancey Street and that whole area. And this is all stuff that could have been happening under Mayor Adams, but he didn't care about it. 34th Street busway, let's get it going. And you're right, it is downhill because this mayor gets it. This mayor travels around the city using a bicycle, using the subway, using the bus. And not only that, he believes in and respects and honors and sees as his constituents the people who ride public transportation.
That last part is also fascinating to me because de Blasio was considered like a outer borough mayor on some level, or at least he came in. But that at that time, it was about people who were commuting, but there was a car flavor to it. But it feels like Mamdani has found probably what constitutes a bigger constituency of outer borough community. I mean, which is not to say that's all where his support is. I mean, it's been basically pretty broad based. But speaking to that constituency that like commutes into the city, but does so like by public transport, which, you know, once you get out into the outer boroughs, it's probably a bus and then a train. You know, you're going to have to switch. And so the idea of a fast bus at that point makes a big difference in terms of just like, you can save you 10, 15 minutes, you know, both ways. That's a half hour. You know, you're talking about almost 4 hours, 5 hours a week of commuting. That's a, you know, that's a half a day that you could be saving. How much does a change in ideology implicate this particular issue, which in and of itself is not necessarily ideological?
Yeah, you know, so much of it comes down to political leadership. And, you know, as much as we really are all about bottom-up organizing and really having that movement there, you have that movement has to keep working so that when you have someone like a Mamdani ready to be the strong, sort of benevolent executive, that they're ready to go. You know, Ghent, it was Philippe Boiteo and the mayor above him who said, let's do it. In Emeryville, California, we talk about the former mayor, John Botters, who said, like, no, I was elected to do something like this, and I'm going to do this. Ante Hidalgo in Paris, same thing. She ran on a platform of expanding bikes and public space and was reelected and said, this is what we promised to do during the campaign, and this is what we're going to deliver on. The referendum was the election. And I think sometimes, you know, we have the election and then we have the fighting over the implementation of the programs. And I think with Mamdani, you're going to see him saying, you know, I ran on this. I ran on making the bus fast and free. The free part's going to be challenging to deliver, but I think the fast part will be a lot simpler than most people think. It's largely just get the cars out of the way, you know, build bus lanes, give them dedicated signal priority where they can get through intersections. But yeah, you know, this should be a nonpartisan issue, right? Everybody, red state, blue state, they love walking in seaside communities or Disneyland or on bike paths and recreational trails. People love this stuff, and it should be, you know, I always say it's sort of like the traditional conservative value: independence, self-reliance. You don't have to be licensed by the government. You don't have to pay taxes to the government for your vehicle if you ride a bicycle or if you use your own 2 feet. So it should be nonpartisan.
Well, I mean, I guess that I get that it should be nonpartisan in the sense that, you know, Republican, Democrat. But It seems to me that when you're talking about how do we improve the quality of life for the largest constituency in any city, or which is going to, particularly in cities, I guess, maybe there's a different dynamic in the context of the suburbs. But you're talking about people who are broadly working class, and you can make things more accessible and easier and literally just like better in some ways, with almost like with taking away rather than having to add in some ways. I mean, obviously you need to sort of replace, you need to have, but that to me seems ideological. And the reason why Mamdani's coming in and doing this stuff is because that was built in to his ideological movement, that was built in there. I mean, how do you deal with it in the context of the suburbs where often it's the reverse? Like light rail, okay, it's gonna, you know, might make my commute into the city easier, but my neighbors, I may not like my neighbors now because they have the ability to get into the city.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. You have to ask yourself why somebody like Sean Duffy, the current, you know, Secretary of Transportation under this administration, spends so much time demonizing public transportation and saying how terrifying and dangerous it is, when, of course, 40,000 Americans die in car crashes every year. And that's the real danger. Why is it that he's focusing on these things? I really do think that it's a fundamentally anti-urban hostility that actually is traced. You can trace it back to Thomas Jefferson, who thought that cities were pestilential and that they had absolutely that they were sort of a place where sin and so forth would flourish. There's a fundamentally anti-urban strain in American politics that goes all the way back. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And I think, frankly, it's a big part of what we're seeing happening in the last couple of weeks in Minneapolis, before that in Chicago, and before that in Los Angeles and all these other cities. The idea that cities are a robust and, pluralistic place where people are free to be themselves and free to express themselves is fundamentally threatening to a fascist regime, right? And so you often see cities getting targeted. And I do think that the sustained...
It's racialized too, right?
It's absolutely racialized.
Like coming out of Atlanta, like I think it was Atlanta, where they're not going to build the football stadium, or they're not going to have a light rail to the football stadium because they don't want, people from
the transit system there had been talks to expand it way back 20, 30 years ago. And the fear was it was going to bring, the wrong people, all kind of code words, to those places. So the racial component of it is woven right in.
Right. And that goes back to the beginning, right? That goes back to the interstate highway system, because don't forget that the way the interstate highway system was constructed was not just, a poor use of resources in terms of creating sprawl development, but it was also aimed at the cities. It destroyed cities quite physically. And we were just in Houston. They're widening the freeway there. You've got 22, 24 lane freeways, and they're still playing, let's add another lane for $10 billion or $40 billion. So, the communities that are being impacted, guess what, are the exact same Black and brown communities that were targeted back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. So, it's a fundamentally anti-urban movement.
Well, Sam, I think also the thing about the suburbs too is, I grew up, like we were mentioning, Andover, Massachusetts, and there was a little girl who was killed there in the downtown by a truck because it is a main road through the town. And her parents sprung into action, and they have done a lot to make Andover a lot safer by saying, we should have shorter crosswalks and safer places for people to walk and sidewalks where none existed before. So, people move to the suburbs, right? A lot of times, not just because of affordability or whatever, but because they imagine it's safer for them and their kids. And like Sarah was saying, but yet all of these people die in crashes. So I think there is an argument. Yes, it's going to be hard to get light rail to and from cities and suburbs and really connect these places. But if we can make downtowns, sort of traditional American downtowns, I'm sort of using quotes around that, safer, I think that will be better for everyone for those short trips.
Well, I think it's not a coincidence that you have white flight and, the 56 Highway Act, I believe, or all these, the proliferation of the highways. And what you're saying, Sarah, in particular, it rings so true to me, because I've been saying this for the past year and a half or so, this fixation on crime, and it's really been pushed by our tech overlords on our social media platforms, fits quite nicely with the Trump administration and their kind of fascist project here, because cities are threats via multiculturalism. So if we are going, if we've got to oust these progressive prosecutors, Chesa Boudin, and the tech money is going to go towards that, we can make our cities into purely private spaces for the wealthy. That's their agenda. And then the fascists and the racists in the Trump administration, their agenda is more racial strife, more division. Yeah. And that's where suburbia comes into it as well. You have the New York Postification of the right-wing MAGA base, and it's because they can use urban decay as a racist trope for electoral gains.
Or think about why the tech industry is always reinventing the bus every few years, right? It's not because the bus is not efficient. The bus is actually one of the most efficient ways for people to get around cities. Like, why is the tech industry always saying, instead of a bus with 40 people on it, we could give you a bus with 10 people on it? It's not because the bus doesn't work. It's because Black and brown people and poor people and homeless people ride the bus. And the rich tech folks don't want to be around that. They want to select the people that they can get around with. So I think it combines the sort of like our tech overlords and the racialized part of everything that we're talking about, and the urban suburban sort of dynamic that's going on as well.
And the rent seeking aspect of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like, hey, how can we profit off of something that people have been doing for a long time and haven't had to pay a middleman for? Oh, I know. Let's make an app for that.
Yeah.
Has there been a movement? I mean, we have we've had initiatives to from the federal government to connect everyone through internet. I mean, it hasn't necessarily gone great in some areas, and the Trump administration just totally shit canned it in an amazing fashion 6 months ago with the great big beautiful bill. And they, and there was a lot of false starts and a lot of sort of like learning curve on how we get everyone wired, providing grants. And I'm thinking in terms of like rural areas, but rural areas that, ultimately there's like a small town that focused. And one thing I've noticed, particularly in the context of, let's say, upstate New York and maybe more Western Massachusetts, where I've had some experience, you have this small town, there's sidewalks in the small town, but if you go 30 yards out of town, like you can't get there except for a car. Like you've got to either walk in the woods. You can't ride your bike unless you are really, it takes a lot of guts. You need to have a big flag on their back and hope that, these cars, because it's 55 miles an hour until you're like 150 yards from the town. And then has there ever been any type of, and is it even worth it, I guess, from a federal perspective, to sort of say, like, we're going to do an initiative where you need to put a bike path / sidewalk. I don't know if you have like an area where there's more than 750 people living in a, a 2 mile square area, then you need to have a certain amount of like bike path or sidewalk leading into that area. Has there ever been an initiative like that? Is it worth it?
Well, there have been a couple. I mean, unfortunately, it was canceled by the Trump administration, but there was the Reconnecting Communities program that would have taken, some of these highways, for example, that split communities in places like Syracuse and would have turned them into at-grade boulevards or things like that. California has pushed some bills that are forcing towns to build housing near train stations and near transit. That just went into effect this year. So it is happening, but it's very slow going for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Sam, you're absolutely right to call that out as a possibility. We have all sorts of things in our engineering codes that are required, and there's really no reason that we couldn't have an evolution toward a more holistic kind of engineering code that really sees streets and roads not as traffic sewers, not as simple conduits for traffic to go through, for car traffic to go through, but instead holistic parts of the community. And I'd just like to add, 30% of people in the United States of America don't hold a driver's license. That includes young people. That includes people with disabilities that prevent them from driving. That includes people who are not documented. That includes also, there are a lot of people who can't drive anymore because they've aged out of it. And frankly, there probably are people who have licenses that shouldn't have them.
Right.
But the complete erasure of 30% of the people in this country and saying, you don't deserve anything except, well, if you're lucky, you'll have a taxi service or a ride hail service or an autonomous taxi that you'll be able to afford the huge costs that are going straight to venture capital, that then maybe you'll be able to move about your community safely and access the the resources that are there in terms of employment and education, healthcare, and all the rest. But fundamentally, we need to rethink these things, and there has been rethinking going on. And I think it's important for people who care about these issues to remember this is a very long arc that we're in. This is, as I said, it predates living memory. And so right there, you're starting at a disadvantage because you have to help people imagine what things could be like by showing them examples and taking them places where they can see those examples in action. And, yes, right now we are under an administration that is actively working against these values that we espouse and that many others do as well. But that's true of everything about this administration. So it's not time to lie down right now. Right now is the time to keep fighting. And I think that people around the country, again, we've been in cities from Portland, Oregon to Houston, Texas, and Providence, Rhode Island. And every city that we go to has really active advocacy groups who are fighting hard. And not only that, there are elected officials who are coming and appearing with us on stage at our shows and showing that they really understand these issues. City council members, state senators. There is a whole new generation of politicians coming up that gets this. And so as we fight our way out of the situation that we're in, we have to be prepared when we do get out of this situation, and I believe that we will and we must, that we are ready to take advantage of the new generation of leadership and the new generation of voters who actually really get this, because a lot of younger people get it and they don't want to live like this anymore.
Sarah Goodyear, Doug Gordon. The book is Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile. We'll also link to your podcast, A War on Cars. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks for having us.
All right, folks. I'm going to head into the fun half of the program. Quotes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we will have some fun.
Yes.
Just a reminder, your support makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityReport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, but you also get the fun half. And you can IM the fun half on our app. How do you get the app? All you got to do is go to majorityapp.com. Choose. Are you an iOS person? Are you a Android person? You click on that link, and then you get it for free. And I mean really for free. You are not the product in our app. We do not have
no side deals.
No side deals. We have no SDK packets. We don't follow you. We don't sell your information to hedge funds or to private equity.
Or political campaigns.
Or political campaigns or to betting sites.
How the fuck am I even supposed to sell this property?
We don't do any of that. And at the very least, it's certainly a lack of competency on our part for not doing any of that, and effort and laziness.
Really it's nice when ethics correlates with a lack of effort, because then you can just not put the effort in. But
if we were highly motivated, then we would have an ethical challenge. But fortunately,
rarely faced with compromise when you're not working.
Like, I'm not gonna fucking do it. Are you serious? I did enough by doing the majorityapp.com. That took a lot of effort.
It's like the COVID business relief checks. I'm like, I could have got left reckoning in there for that.
It's the back end of the website, and I've got to put a whole new domain name and then go and forward and do all that stuff. It took hours.
I need a nap just from hearing the process.
No. I'm almost too tired to say, check out our Discord at majoritydiscord.com. Again, another place where we don't monetize or any of that.
And somebody might say, you say the hours that it would take an effort, but you put it over the amount you would get in return. And it's like, we don't do math here.
Right.
Exactly. Listen, it wasn't until like 6 months ago that I found out what ROI means. I was like, who's the freaking Roy guy?
Yeah.
Like,
the
what
old
is
goalie
like,
for the Canadians?
What is going on here? So, also, Oh, but our merch store, that's where we really suck the life out of you. Check it out at shop.majorityreportradio.com. We got some great merch there.
Yes.
And man, all union made, union printed, and U.S. And we still have managed to have good prices. What else? Oh, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leck? Oh, and before we do that, also, yeah, go ahead, Matt. You tell it, and I got something else to plug.
Left Reckoning patrons, some of my favorite people out there, would have got the Sunday show yesterday, which we talked about Jasmine Crockett and this hot water. Some comedians are in for saying that she's a little bit self-centered, which I think is kind of just objectively true, although it's not my main problem with her.
The Las Culturistas guy, they had a common sense take on Jasmine Crockett, and they're getting raked over the coals for it.
And we also talked about Matt Taibbi's new opinion on the Iraq War, which he had a lot of time to express. Doing.
We mentioned that the other day too, right?
Yeah, we did. And with GT,
we have another clip of him.
Oh man,
did you get that one?
No, but I can bring it over from Friday. Yeah, I can do that.
Was that about the murder? Oh, this is even a newer one that I found. Jeez.
We discussed the take the oil thing, which he didn't tell you on this show or Amy Goodman. He saved it for his 2026.
I interviewed him 50 times.
He did
between
3 different
2004 and 2024.
He did 3 different media tours about how bad the media was on the war in Iraq, and neglected to say that. Oh yeah, by the way, I think if we're gonna do a war, we should take the oil.
Also, what does that mean?
Exactly.
Everybody goes down to the town square with their pots and their pans and grabs some oil. I want to plug this. Will you pop this up? I just did. It is an exhibition of artwork by children from Gaza in New York City. It is taking place tomorrow, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. at the Kalem Gallery, 526 West 26th Street, number 315. You can find this on Instagram, but we'll link to it in our podcast and YouTube description. Miss Rachel writes, the kids of Gaza and I are having an art show in New York City. I'm unbelievably proud of them. They named the show, wrote their stories, shared what this means to them, and of course, created incredible art. You can check it out. It's organized in collaboration with the voice of Hin Rahab film.
Hin Rajab, yeah.
And I think that film is coming out now, and folks should check that film out as well.
I've heard a few people who've seen it.
We played, I think, a promo of it a while back.
One of the executive producers is Ahmed Khan, who will be here with them on Thursday.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. So you guys can talk about that.
I didn't know
he
was an executive producer. Okay, there you go. So, yes, I've heard it's devastating. I haven't gotten an opportunity to see it yet, but everyone should check out that film.
This is the film. This is you'll recall this story of this little girl who was basically trapped in a vehicle that had been attacked by Israel.
6-year-old girl. The Israeli government had killed. She was trying to flee, I think, with members of her family. They killed everyone in the car except her. She was in the car for hours and hours. Israel then killed the paramedics on a cell phone.
Yeah, we know about it because of that call. And how many times did a similar thing happen where a child couldn't get on a phone?
She was calling. Then they killed the ambulance members, I believe, also that were trying to get her, and then eventually killed that little girl who was by herself alone, crying out for hours and hours.
California Resistance. IAMS just saw that film at Palm Springs Film Festival. It was one of the best of the fest.
Yeah.
All right. Well, gonna take a quick break, and we'll be right back with the fun half.